Welcome to English Stories Journey. Listen, relax, and grow your English with every story. It was a warm afternoon in London. The light of the sun fell through tall windows into a large studio. The smell of paint and flowers filled the air. On an easel stood a portrait, almost finished. It showed a young man with golden hair and blue eyes. His beauty was unusual, almost too perfect for this world. The painter, Basil Hallward, looked at his work with pride, and also with fear. He was proud because it was the best painting he had ever made, but he was afraid, too, because he had put too much of his own soul into the canvas. Basil's friend, Lord Henry Wotton, sat nearby, smoking a cigarette. He was older than Basil, elegant, with lazy eyes and a mocking smile. He liked to say clever, shocking things, words that made people laugh or blush. "This young man," said Lord Henry, looking at the portrait, "is extraordinary. Who is he?" Basil shook his head. "No, Harry, I cannot tell you. I cannot show the world this portrait either. It reveals too much of myself." Lord Henry laughed softly. "My dear Basil, an artist should show his art to everyone. This picture is genius, and the model, he must be a remarkable person." At that moment, the door opened and the model himself entered. Dorian Gray was hardly 20 years old. His face had the purity of a boy and the charm of a man. When he smiled, the whole room seemed brighter. He carried himself with an innocence that made people want to protect him, but also admire him. Basil greeted him warmly, but Lord Henry rose with curiosity. "So, this is the famous Dorian Gray. You are even more beautiful than your picture." Dorian blushed slightly. He was used to compliments, but Lord Henry's voice was different. It sounded dangerous, as if his words carried a secret power. The three men talked. Basil tried to keep the conversation light, but Lord Henry soon began one of his speeches. He spoke about youth and beauty, about how short they were. "You have only a few years," Lord Henry told Dorian, his eyes fixed on him, "to live truly, perfectly, completely. When your youth goes, your beauty will go with it. Then you will suddenly discover that nothing can give you the same joy. The gods have been kind to you, Dorian. Don't waste this gift. Live for pleasure, for beauty, for yourself. That is all that matters." Dorian listened in silence. These words were new to him. He had lived an innocent life until now, not thinking much about the future. But suddenly he felt afraid of losing his youth, afraid of wrinkles and age. He turned to the portrait. The painted face smiled back at him, fresh and young forever. A cruel thought struck him. Why should the picture remain young while I must grow old? If only the picture could grow old and I could stay young forever. For that, I would give anything. I would give even my soul. Lord Henry smiled slightly. Basil turned pale. "Don't say such things," the painter warned. "That is terrible." But Dorian's eyes still rested on the portrait. Something inside him had changed. A seed had been planted, an idea too dangerous to forget. After a while, Basil declared the day's work finished. The portrait was complete, Dorian Gray in all his youthful perfection. Basil insisted he would never show the painting to the public. Lord Henry disagreed. He said, "It is art. It must be seen." "No," Basil repeated. "I have put too much of myself in it." Dorian laughed, but his laughter was not as innocent as before. He felt both proud and jealous of the picture. Proud because it showed his beauty. Jealous because it would never change while he would. When Dorian left with Lord Henry, Basil stayed behind in the studio. He looked once more at the portrait. The painted face was so real, so alive, that Basil almost believed it could hear him. "You will ruin him, Harry," he whispered to himself. "You will make him like you. And I have given him the power of art. God help us all." Outside, Dorian walked through the garden with Lord Henry. The young man listened eagerly to the older man's voice, which was like music, full of strange and dangerous ideas. "Remember," Lord Henry said, "youth is the only thing worth having. When you are old, you will regret nothing but the moments you did not enjoy." Dorian nodded, his heart beating fast. He did not notice how the roses in the garden faded as the sun began to set. He did not notice the cold wind rising. He only thought of his face, his youth, his beauty, and the secret wish he had made before the portrait. From that afternoon in the garden, Dorian Gray's life began to change. He could not forget the words Lord Henry had spoken. They echoed in his mind like music. Youth is the only thing worth having. Beauty is power. Live for pleasure, not for rules. Whenever Dorian visited Basil's studio, he no longer listened much to the painter. Instead, he looked for Lord Henry. He wanted to hear more of his ideas, even if they were dangerous. Lord Henry was delighted. He enjoyed shaping the young man, watching Dorian's innocent eyes grow brighter with curiosity. "Don't let society tell you what to do," Lord Henry said one afternoon as they sat in a quiet restaurant. "Morality is a trap. The only things that matter are your own desires. If something gives you pleasure, it is good. If it makes you suffer, it is bad. That is the only rule worth following." Dorian listened carefully. His heart beat quickly as he imagined a life full of new experiences, free from fear or guilt. Still, Basil noticed the change in him. "Harry, you are too dangerous," Basil said when they were alone. "You will spoil him. Dorian is pure and good. Don't fill his head with your strange ideas." But Lord Henry only smiled. "My dear Basil, he is not a child. He must choose for himself. And besides, he is far too interesting to remain innocent." One evening, Lord Henry took Dorian to a small, cheap theater in a poor part of London. The air was heavy with smoke, and the wooden chairs creaked. But when the curtain rose, Dorian forgot everything around him. On the stage was a young actress. Her name was Sybil Vane. She was not rich or famous, but when she spoke, her voice was like music. She played Juliet from Romeo and Juliet, and her face shone with emotion. Dorian was enchanted. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her. He forgot Lord Henry. He forgot the audience. He forgot himself. For the first time in his life, he felt the power of love. After the play, Dorian begged to go backstage. Lord Henry followed with amusement. They found Sybil in a small dressing room, her cheeks still red from acting. She was surprised to see them, especially the beautiful young gentleman with golden hair. Dorian spoke to her gently, and she smiled shyly. Her life had always been simple: work at the theater, live with her poor family, dream of better things. But Dorian seemed like a prince from a fairy tale. From that night, Dorian returned again and again to the theater. He watched Sybil act as Desdemona, Rosalind, Imogen. Each time she seemed more perfect, more full of poetry and soul. To Lord Henry, it was just another story of romance. But to Dorian, it was everything. One afternoon, he came to Basil's studio, his face shining with excitement. "Basil, Harry, I have news. I am in love." Basil looked at him with surprise. "In love? With whom?" "With an actress. Her name is Sybil Vane.
She is the greatest artist in the world." Lord Henry laughed softly. "An actress? How romantic! Tell us more." Dorian's voice trembled with passion. "When I am with her, the whole world seems new. She is pure. She is wonderful. She has never been touched by the ugliness of life. To me, she is Juliet. She is every beautiful heroine. I want to marry her." "Marry her?" Basil cried. "But you hardly know her." "I know her heart," Dorian said firmly. "Isn't that enough? Basil, you cannot understand. You paint beauty, but she is beauty. When she acts, she shows me truth itself." Lord Henry's eyes sparkled with interest. He loved to see Dorian's passion. "This is excellent," he said. "Marriage, innocence, love, it is all a play. And you, my dear boy, are the actor who will enjoy it most." Basil shook his head sadly. He feared that Dorian's heart was too easily captured, too easily broken. That evening, Dorian returned to the theater. When Sybil appeared on stage, he felt his heart rise like music. He promised himself that he would protect her, love her, and give her the life of a queen. After the performance, they walked together through the dark streets. The gas lamps glowed faintly, and the city was noisy with carriages. But for Dorian, the world was silent except for Sybil's voice. "You are so different from everyone," she said softly. "When you look at me, I feel like I am truly alive. And you are my Juliet. I will love you forever. One day the world will know your name, and they will know that you belong to me." Sybil laughed, a sound as light as silver bells. "I don't need the world," she whispered. "I only need you." Dorian kissed her hand. He felt pure happiness, as if his wish before the portrait had been forgotten, as if his soul were still safe. But somewhere, deep inside him, Lord Henry's words continued to whisper, "Live for pleasure. Follow your desire. Nothing else matters." And so Dorian's heart was divided between the innocence of Sybil's love and the dangerous influence of Lord Henry's philosophy.
The days that followed were full of excitement for Dorian Gray. He visited Sybil Vane every evening, and each time she welcomed him with a shy smile. Her eyes shone when she saw him. For Sybil, Dorian was no ordinary young man. He was a prince, her dream come true. But for Dorian, she was more than a girl. She was art itself. When she acted, she filled the stage with beauty. He loved to watch her as Juliet, as Desdemona, as Rosalind. Each role was a different jewel, and he admired her as a collector admires rare treasures. One evening, Dorian invited Lord Henry and Basil to see Sybil act. He wanted to show them his love, to prove that she was indeed the greatest actress in the world. The theater was small and crowded. The audience waited impatiently for the play to begin. Dorian sat proudly in his seat, his heart beating fast. This would be the night when his friends understood why he adored her. The curtain rose. Sybil stepped onto the stage, dressed as Juliet. The light touched her face, and the theater grew silent. But something was wrong. Her voice, usually full of passion, sounded flat. Her movements were stiff, her words empty. She spoke Shakespeare's lines as if they meant nothing, like a child reading from a school book. The audience grew restless. People coughed, whispered, even laughed. Dorian's face turned pale. His heart sank lower with every line she spoke. Where was the magic, the fire, the beauty he had seen before? Instead of Juliet, there stood only a frightened girl. Lord Henry leaned back in his chair with a small smile. Basil looked at Dorian with pity. "This is dreadful," whispered Dorian, covering his face with his hand. The play ended with polite applause, but it was clear the performance had failed.
Backstage, Dorian found Sybil waiting for him. Her eyes were shining, not with fear, but with joy. She ran to him and took his hands. "Did you see?" she cried. "Tonight I was free. I did not act because I did not need to act. Before, the stage was everything to me, but now I have real love. You, Dorian, you are my reality. Acting is nothing compared to our love." But Dorian pulled his hands away. His face was cold, his voice sharp. "You have killed my love," he said. "I came here to see the greatest actress in the world. Instead, I saw a foolish, empty girl. You are no longer Sybil Vane, the artist. You are nothing. I can never see you again." Sybil's smile faded. She looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "But I love you," she whispered. "Isn't that enough?" "No," Dorian said cruelly. "Without your art, you are worthless. You have ruined yourself. I don't want you anymore." He turned and left her standing in the little dressing room, her heart breaking. The morning sun came through Dorian's window, soft and golden. He opened his eyes and remembered the cruel words he had spoken. For a moment, guilt touched him. He thought of Sybil's pale face and her pleading voice. "I was too hard," he told himself. "She is young. She will forget. I will send her flowers today, and everything will be well again." He dressed and went out into the city, planning to see her. But on his way home, he found a letter waiting for him. It was from Lord Henry. The letter was short. "My dear boy, don't be shocked by this sad news. Sybil Vane has died. She drank poison last night. It is a tragic end to a beautiful romance." Dorian dropped the paper. For a moment, he felt the room spin around him. Sybil, dead. The girl who loved him so completely? He pressed his hands to his face. But then another thought came. Lord Henry's words, cool and clever. It is a tragic end to a beautiful romance. Slowly, Dorian began to feel not guilt, but curiosity. Life was like art, and Sybil's death was part of a terrible but perfect story. He remembered his cruel words, but instead of regret, he felt a strange excitement. That evening, Dorian went into the room where his portrait stood. The painted face smiled back at him, youthful and perfect. But as he looked closer, he gasped. Something had changed. Around the mouth, there was now a faint line, hard, cruel, almost mocking. The eyes seemed colder, less innocent. Dorian stepped back, trembling. His wish had come true. The portrait had begun to change, to bear the mark of his sins, while his own face remained untouched. He touched his cheeks. They were smooth and fair. No shadow of guilt, no line of cruelty. Only the painted image showed the truth. At first he was afraid, but then he remembered his wish, to stay young forever, while the portrait grew old instead. "It is true," he whispered. "It is happening. My soul is in the picture, not in me. I am safe. No one will ever know." He locked the door behind him. The secret was his alone. And so, as Sybil Vane was carried to her grave, Dorian Gray stood before his portrait with shining eyes. The cruel smile on the canvas was only the beginning.
The discovery of the portrait's change filled Dorian with fear, but also with fascination. He understood now that his wish had come true. His sins and his corruption would mark the painting, not his body.
He would remain young and beautiful, no matter what he did. Still, he could not let anyone else see it. Basil must never know. Servants must never enter the room. One night, Dorian carried the painting upstairs. The house was quiet, and the heavy frame pressed against his arms. He chose an empty room at the top of the house, a dusty space where nobody ever went. He locked the door and kept the key in his pocket. From that moment, the portrait became his greatest secret. Whenever he felt guilty, whenever he thought of Sybil Vane, he went to the locked room. The face on the canvas was his conscience, showing him what he had done. But to the world, he remained the same, fresh, handsome, innocent. Lord Henry was pleased. "The tragedy of Sybil Vane is nothing to regret," he told Dorian. "It was a perfect artistic ending. Now you must live, truly live. Enjoy every experience, seek every pleasure. That is the purpose of life." And Dorian obeyed. He dressed in the most fashionable clothes. He visited theaters, restaurants, and secret clubs. People whispered about his charm, his beauty, his endless youth. Wherever he went, he was admired, envied, desired. But behind the admiration, there was gossip. Some said he ruined young men, leading them into scandal. Others said women who loved him came to sad ends. None could explain why he looked untouched, while those around him seemed broken. Dorian only smiled. He knew the truth was hidden upstairs, in the locked room. Seasons turned into years. Dorian watched his friends grow older, lines appearing on their faces, hair turning gray. Basil, the painter, grew more serious and lonely. Even Lord Henry, still clever with words, became heavier and slower. But Dorian was always the same. His skin remained smooth, his hair golden, his eyes bright. He looked no older than the day Basil had first painted him. Strangers whispered, "He cannot be more than 20." But in reality, years had passed. And in the locked room, the portrait changed more and more. Sometimes, late at night, Dorian unlocked the door and held a lamp close to the canvas. Each time, the changes shocked him. The once perfect face was twisted with cruelty. The mouth was hard, mocking. The eyes seemed filled with lies and secrets. The skin grew older, not only with age, but with sin. It looked heavy with greed, lust, and shame. The hands on the canvas even showed signs of blood, though Dorian himself was spotless. He shivered, but he could not look away. It was as if the picture was a mirror of his soul, showing him what he truly was. "Better the portrait than me," he whispered. "Better the canvas than my face. I can still walk in the sunlight, admired and pure. Nobody will ever know." He locked the door again and returned to his world of music, jewels, perfumes, and parties. Outwardly, Dorian was a gentleman, charming and elegant. He entertained guests with wit and beauty. Ladies smiled when he entered a room. Young men followed his example. But in hidden places, he sought darker pleasures. There were nights of gambling, of drink, of sins whispered but never spoken openly. Some who entered his world were destroyed by it. Yet Dorian's name remained untarnished, for his face told no story. One evening, Lord Henry said to him, half joking, "You must have the secret of eternal youth. Tell me, how do you look like a boy while the rest of us grow old?" Dorian laughed lightly, but his hand trembled. He thought of the locked door upstairs, of the portrait with its growing ugliness. He thought of Sybil's dead face. "Perhaps it is only luck," he replied. Though Dorian enjoyed every pleasure, he was never completely free from fear. Sometimes he dreamed of the portrait, of its cruel eyes watching him. Sometimes he imagined the servants breaking into the locked room and discovering his secret. And sometimes, late at night, when the city was silent, he heard his own conscience whisper, "You have sold your soul for youth. One day the price must be paid." But he silenced the voice with wine, with music, with laughter. He told himself there was plenty of time, plenty of years to enjoy. The portrait would bear the punishment, not him. And so, as years passed, the man who looked like an angel became, in truth, something far darker. His beauty remained unbroken, but his soul, locked inside the painted canvas, grew more hideous with every sin.
Dorian Gray's friendship with Lord Henry grew stronger with every year. The painter Basil still visited him, but Basil's gentle advice seemed weak compared to Lord Henry's glittering words. When Lord Henry spoke, the world sounded like a stage play, and life itself seemed to be a performance of beauty and pleasure. "Conscience is nothing," Lord Henry would say, lazily smoking a cigarette. "It is only the voice of other people telling us what they fear. You must never be ruled by that. You must live for yourself. Seek beauty, seek new experiences, and never apologize." Dorian listened eagerly. He loved the way Lord Henry's words freed him from guilt. When he remembered Sybil Vane's death, when he thought of the strange changes in the locked portrait, he told himself that Henry was right. Morality was only a prison. He was free. One afternoon, Dorian visited Lord Henry at his house. The older man handed him a book, bound in yellow cover, its pages full of strange stories. "This is a novel," Lord Henry explained. "It is about a young man who tries every kind of pleasure: art, perfumes, jewels, clothes, even sins. I think you will like it." Dorian took the book home. That evening, he began to read, and soon he could not stop. The hero of the story lived as he lived, searching for beauty in every form. Page after page described wild passions, secret adventures, and the endless hunger for experience. Dorian read until dawn. When he finally closed the book, his eyes were burning, but his heart was excited. "This is my life," he whispered. "This book shows me the path I must follow." The next day, he bought many copies and carried them with him wherever he went. He decorated his house with exotic objects, studied rare music, collected jewels, perfumes, and clothes. His life became an imitation of the strange novel. Years continued to pass, but Dorian remained young. His face was smooth, his eyes bright, his smile perfect. People stared in wonder when he walked into a room. But around him, rumors began to spread. Some whispered that young men who became his friends soon lost their honor, their money, even their health. Others said women who loved him ended in despair. There were stories of secret places, wild nights, and shameful pleasures. Yet whenever Dorian appeared in society, he looked so innocent, so untouched, that no one dared accuse him openly. His beauty was his shield. Old men who envied him still bowed politely. Ladies who knew the gossip still asked for his company, and those who were ruined by him remained silent, too ashamed to speak. Basil Hallward, the painter, suffered most. He loved Dorian still, but he heard the whispers, and they filled him with sadness. One day, he said to Lord Henry, "There is something wrong in Dorian's life. People say he is destroying everyone around him. It cannot be true. He is too beautiful." Lord Henry only smiled. "Beauty is all that matters. If Dorian has found pleasure,
then he is wise. The rest is nothing. For Dorian, beauty became a kind of power. He saw how people forgave him anything because of his perfect face. He realized he could walk in the darkest places and still be admired in the brightest salons. But when he returned home at night, he often unlocked the hidden door and carried his lamp to the portrait. The face in the painting was no longer simply cruel. It was now heavy with vice, swollen with corruption, marked with lines of selfish pleasure. The eyes were cunning, the mouth sneered with arrogance. Sometimes Dorian shivered, but he always told himself, "It is only the portrait that suffers, not me. I am safe. I am free." Then he would blow out the lamp, lock the door, and return to his life of parties, art, and secret sins. To the world, Dorian Gray was a young prince of beauty, admired wherever he went. To himself, he was the hero of the yellow-covered book, chasing every experience, tasting every pleasure, living without limits. But to the silent portrait in the locked room, he was something else entirely, a soul growing darker and uglier with every year. And so, while society whispered and Basil worried, Dorian listened only to Lord Henry's voice, calm and clever. Morality is a dream, beauty is truth. Live for yourself, Dorian. The rest is a waste of time. Dorian smiled when he remembered these words. They excused everything, even the secrets he could never tell.
It was a dark, rainy night when Basil Hallward came to visit Dorian Gray. The painter looked older, more tired than before. He had heard too many rumors about Dorian, rumors of broken friendships, ruined reputations, and secret sins. When Dorian welcomed him into the library, Basil looked at him sadly. "Dorian," he said softly, "I must speak with you. People say terrible things about you. They say you destroy everyone who comes close to you. I cannot believe it, not of you. But if even half of it is true, you must change your life. You must become good again." Dorian laughed bitterly. "Good again? You talk as if I were a child. Do you really think I am innocent, Basil?" The painter's voice trembled. "I know you are still capable of goodness. Your face is so young, so pure. It cannot hide a soul of evil." Dorian's eyes flashed with anger. He suddenly felt tired of Basil's gentle words. He wanted the truth to be known, wanted Basil to see what no one else could see. "You think my face is pure? You think I am innocent?" Dorian whispered. "Come, I will show you what I really am." He led Basil upstairs, through the silent house, to the locked room where the portrait was hidden. He unlocked the door with shaking hands and carried in a lamp. "There," Dorian said, pointing to the covered canvas, "you shall see the truth tonight. You, the one who painted it, should be the one to witness what your art has become." With a sudden movement, he pulled away the cloth. Basil gasped. The portrait was hideous. The face, once so beautiful, was twisted with cruelty and corruption. The eyes were hard and cold, the mouth sneered with pride and sin. The hands looked stained, as if with blood. The whole figure was monstrous, a picture of a ruined soul. "My God!" Basil cried, stepping back. "What does this mean? That face! It is yours, Dorian! But how?" "It is the face of my soul," Dorian said quietly. "Every sin, every crime, every cruel thought, it all lives there, in your painting. You gave me the key to eternal youth, Basil. You and your portrait." Basil covered his face with his hands. "No, this is impossible. It is blasphemy.
You must pray, Dorian. Pray for forgiveness. God is merciful. Even now it is not too late." The painter sank to his knees, tears in his eyes. "Pray, Dorian. Pray before it is too late. Repent of your sins. Destroy this evil life you are living. Let God save you. Do not go on this path to ruin." For a moment, Dorian felt a strange weakness in his heart. Basil's voice was full of love, full of desperate hope. Could he truly change? Could he fall to his knees and pray? But then the cruel sneer of the portrait seemed to mock him. He thought of Lord Henry's words, "Morality is nothing, beauty is power. Live for yourself." A cold anger arose in him. He hated Basil for painting the portrait, for giving him this curse, this reminder of his sins. "Pray?" Dorian hissed. "No, Basil, it is too late for that. Too late for both of us." Suddenly, a dark fury filled him. He picked up the knife that lay on the table, the knife he used to open letters. Before Basil could rise, before he could cry out, Dorian drove the blade deep into his friend's body. Basil gave a single terrible cry, then fell silent. Dorian struck again and again, his face hard, his hands shaking but merciless. At last, the painter lay still on the floor, his lifeless eyes staring at the portrait that had destroyed them both. For a moment, the room was filled with silence, broken only by the rain outside. Dorian stood over the body, breathing heavily. His hands were red. He looked at the portrait again. The sneer on its lips seemed deeper, more mocking, as if it had witnessed the crime with delight. "Even this," Dorian muttered, "will not change me. The portrait bears the burden, not I." He wiped the knife, locked the door, and left the room. His face was still young and perfect, untouched by guilt. But inside that locked room lay the body of Basil Hallward, the one man who had truly loved him, the one man who had begged him to be good again. And on the canvas, the painted face grew uglier still, twisted now with the shadow of murder.
The night after Basil's death, Dorian Gray sat in his library, pale but calm. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the city was quiet. Upstairs, in the locked room, Basil's body lay cold beside the terrible portrait. Dorian knew he must act quickly. He could not risk discovery. But he also knew he could not deal with the body alone. He needed help. There was one man he could call, a chemist named Alan Campbell, an old friend from the past. Alan had once loved Dorian deeply, but their friendship had ended in bitterness. Still, Dorian had a secret that could destroy him, and now he would use it. When Alan arrived the next morning, he looked at Dorian coldly. "Why have you sent for me?" he asked. Dorian smiled with false sweetness. "I need your scientific knowledge, Alan. There is something upstairs in my house, something that must be destroyed. You will do it for me." Alan frowned. "I am not your servant. I want nothing to do with you." Dorian's eyes hardened. He took a sealed letter from his pocket and placed it on the table. He said softly, "You will do exactly as I ask, or this letter will be opened and sent. You know what is written inside. You know it will ruin you." Alan's face turned white. His hands shook as he picked up the letter.
He knew Dorian was serious. At last he whispered, "Very well, I will do it, but may God forgive me." That evening, Alan went into the locked room with his instruments and chemicals. When he came out hours later, his face was gray with horror. He left the house without a word. The next day, there was nothing left of Basil Hallward's body. Only the portrait remained, uglier than ever, its painted hands now stained with the memory of murder. Dorian returned to his life of pleasure. He went to parties, dinners, the opera. He smiled and laughed, and society admired him as always. But inside, something had changed. The sound of footsteps in the street made him nervous. A sudden knock on the door made his heart race. He dreamed of Basil's eyes staring at him, of the knife in his hand, of the mocking sneer in the portrait. He told himself he was safe. The body was gone. Alan was silent, and his face was still as young as ever. Yet fear followed him like a shadow.
One night, Dorian decided to escape his fears for a while. He dressed in simple clothes and went to a rough part of London where nobody knew his name. He entered a dark tavern, hoping to lose himself in noise and drink. But as he left the place, a man stepped out of the shadows and seized him by the throat. "You devil!" the man growled. "You killed her! You destroyed my sister!" It was James Vane, Sybil's brother. His eyes burned with hatred as he pressed a gun against Dorian's chest. "For years I have searched for you," James said. "Sybil died because of you. Tonight you will pay." Dorian's heart stopped. He had been careless. At last, his sins had found him. But then a thought struck him. He spoke quickly, his voice calm but desperate. "You are mistaken. You think I am the man who loved your sister? Look at me. Do I look old enough? Sybil died 18 years ago. Do I seem a man who could have known her then?" James stared at him in shock. Dorian's face was smooth, youthful, untouched by time. His golden hair and bright eyes were those of a boy, not a man of 40. "No!" James whispered, lowering his gun slightly. "It cannot be. Sybil's lover would be middle-aged by now. You are far too young." Dorian gave a soft, mocking laugh. "Exactly. You have the wrong man. Release me." James hesitated, then slowly let him go. Dorian walked away quickly, his heart still pounding, but his face calm. Behind him, James Vane stood in the shadows, uncertain, but finally convinced that the beautiful young man could not be his sister's destroyer. Back at home, Dorian poured himself a glass of wine with shaking hands. He had escaped, this time. His beauty had saved him once again. But he knew James Vane was still out there. He knew revenge would not sleep forever. And when he unlocked the door to look at the portrait, the painted eyes seemed to glitter with cruel amusement, as if the canvas itself enjoyed his fear.
For days after his meeting with James Vane, Dorian Gray lived in terror. Every time he left his house, he looked behind him. Every shadow seemed to hide an enemy. Every sudden sound made his heart beat fast. He knew James would not give up so easily. The sailor had the strength of hatred, and hatred was patient. At night, Dorian dreamed of Sybil's pale face and of her brother's burning eyes. He woke in the dark, certain that someone was waiting for him in the room. One afternoon, Dorian visited a country house, hoping that fresh air and hunting would calm his nerves. The wide fields and green gardens were filled with guests, laughter, and music. But even there, he could not escape his fear. On the third day, while walking in the garden with two ladies, Dorian suddenly froze. Between the trees, half hidden in the shadows, he saw a man's face staring at him. It was dark, hard, and full of hate. He gave a cry and nearly fainted. The ladies hurried to his side, asking what was wrong. "Nothing," he whispered quickly. "I thought I saw someone I once knew. It was a mistake." But he knew it was no mistake. James Vane was following him. The next morning, the gentleman went out hunting. The sound of guns echoed across the fields. Suddenly, there was a terrible cry, and one of the men fell to the ground. The hunters gathered in shock. The man was dead. It had been an accident. Someone's gun had fired too soon. When Dorian asked who the victim was, a servant whispered the name. His blood turned cold, then hot with relief. It was James Vane. The sailor who had followed him, the brother who had sworn revenge, was lying dead in the field, killed not by Dorian's hand, but by chance. Dorian locked himself in his room, trembling. "I am safe," he whispered again and again. "Safe at last. He cannot harm me now." But along with the relief came a strange, heavy guilt. He had not killed James with his own hands, yet he felt as if fate itself had murdered for him. Back in London, Dorian tried to quiet his troubled soul. He remembered Basil's words about prayer, about repentance. Perhaps it was not too late to change. One evening, he decided to resist temptation. A young village girl admired him, innocent and pure. Instead of seducing her, he walked away, leaving her unharmed. "I have done a good action," he thought proudly. "At last I have chosen kindness. Perhaps the portrait will be different now. Perhaps it will become beautiful again." Hope filled him as he climbed the stairs to the locked room. With shaking hands, he uncovered the portrait. What he saw made him cry out. The face on the canvas was uglier than ever. But it was not only cruel now, it was hypocritical. The eyes were sly, the mouth twisted into a false smile, as if mocking his attempt at goodness. Dorian stared in horror. "Why?" he whispered. "Why does it look worse? I spared the girl. I tried to be kind. Why is the portrait still evil?" And then he understood. His good action had not been pure. It had not come from love or true repentance. It had come from vanity, from the selfish hope that the portrait would improve. The painted face showed the truth. Dorian's soul was still poisoned. His beauty was only a mask. He covered the portrait quickly, shaking with fear and anger. He realized he could never escape it, not through murder, not through pleasure, not even through false goodness. Wherever he went, whatever he did, the painting would always follow him, recording every hidden thought, every selfish desire, every sin. And though James Vane was dead, the true enemy was still alive, hanging on the wall upstairs, a silent witness of his corruption.
The house was silent. Midnight shadows lay heavy on the walls. Dorian Gray sat alone in his library, staring into the fire. His hands trembled, though the room was warm. He thought of Basil's shocked eyes, of Alan Campbell's pale face, of Sybil's broken body. He thought of James Vane lying dead in the field. And above all, he thought of the portrait, the terrible witness to all his crimes. For years the painting had carried his sins. It had grown old, ugly and cruel, while his face stayed young and perfect. But now, even that gift had become a curse. He could not bear the sneer on its lips, the mocking eyes, the false smile of hypocrisy. He whispered to himself, "The portrait must be destroyed. It is the only way. If I kill it, I will be free.
I will be pure again." With a lamp in one hand and a knife in the other, Dorian climbed the stairs. His steps echoed in the empty hall. He reached the locked door, unlocked it quickly, and entered the secret room. The portrait stood in the corner, half covered by a cloth. Its eyes seemed to follow him as he entered. He pulled away the cover and lifted the lamp. There it was, his true self. The painted face was monstrous, filled with every sin, every cruelty, every false hope. The hands were bloody, the mouth sneered, the eyes glowed with evil. Dorian stared at it with hatred. "You have haunted me for too long," he said through his teeth. "You shall haunt me no more." He raised the knife high. For a moment he hesitated. The painted figure seemed almost alive, as if it were waiting. Then, with a cry of rage and despair, Dorian drove the blade deep into the canvas. A terrible sound echoed through the house, a loud, inhuman cry. The servants woke in terror. They rushed upstairs, following the noise. When they reached the locked room, they found the door shut tight, but from inside came silence, heavy and complete. They broke the door open. On the floor lay the body of a man, old, wrinkled, and hideous. His face was twisted with pain. His hands clutched the knife that pierced his heart. He was dressed in Dorian Gray's fine clothes, but no one at first recognized him. On the wall, the portrait hung once again in all its glory. It showed a young man of extraordinary beauty, pure and innocent, with eyes as bright as summer skies. The servants looked from the painting to the body on the floor. At last they understood. The dead man was Dorian Gray. And so the secret was revealed. The beauty that had protected him, the youth that had deceived the world were gone at last. The portrait remained forever young and perfect, but the man himself lay ruined, destroyed by his own sins. The story of Dorian Gray ended not in eternal youth, but in the triumph of truth. For no one can escape the shadow of their soul.
Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe for more English stories.